Well, to any pothead who watches this video at any time, I'm just saying what I feel about the current scenario that America has allowed itself to get into. And that is the fact that, in the 60s, this is when the real problem of drug addiction started. And it's progressively just kept going on and on through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. And I think this inevitable outcome of our society accepting drug use is really it's Lucifer himself, it's Satan telling the American public that whatever you want to do is okay. Now in the 60s, you had that same philosophy from these potheads who were into LSD and taking Quaaludes and all the rest of these drugs that, the cops at that time were trying to educate young people that this stuff is a dead-end street. If you take drugs, you're going to die eventually. If you don't die from indirect causes like, driving your car off the highway or doing an OD, an overdose. And now you've got the society we live in as of 2016 is saying to our society, well, my child needs this for whatever reason. Now, let me say this to parents who might watch this. If your child has a medical condition that requires them to use marijuana or even cannabis oil, it means that they genetically are so deformed, like a birth defect, that it's happening now all over. People are getting all kinds of different types of genetic defects from their parents. And I question, is it the degeneration of the human condition? In other words, that our genes are breaking down and now people are having more and more children who are having all these kinds of medical problems? Or is it supernatural? In other words, is it caused by Satan himself getting more and more strength and power, and it's kind of like it's breaking down the human desire to live? So kids are getting more and more sick. Is it because society accepts more and more things that have always been seen as wrong? In other words, it's a rebellion against what people knew were right and wrong in the past 50 years. It could partially be that, but no matter how you see the acceptance of drug use, it is still an addiction. If you have a child that's sick, there are probably other ways for them to get help rather than having to use something that's dangerous like a drug or a narcotic. And the inevitable outcome is that the more drug use that's acceptable in our society, the less people are going to say using any kind of drug is wrong. And that's why now it's legal in some states. In California, I know it's legal. I know it's legal in Colorado. Now they use this kind of a generic term and say it's recreational use. All that is the same thing that these kids in the 60s were doing, which is to puff a joint or smoke grass, all these different things. You laugh about it, but how far have we come in 50 years since those kids were taking drugs? It's gotten 1,000 times worse because now our society accepts it. Now it's no longer this is the wrong thing to do because we know what it does to you. I mean, even looking through history as far as like Hollywood, there's been some really, really great people who have had tragic ends because of drug addiction. One person that comes to my mind is Bobby Driscoll. This is a young child actor who was in the Song of the South for Walt Disney. He also did Treasure Island with Robert Louis. And he died of a drug overdose. And he had his whole life ahead of him. Another person that I can think of, most people remember that little girl Buffy Davis, who was in Family Affair with Sissy and Jody and Buffy. She had an overdose too. Now, history says she had an accidental overdose, but it still was drug use, and she died. And this is just kind of sort of examples of how the more acceptable it is for this to happen, and people use it, and now the cops really can't do anything in stopping it, because society has kind of like just done a turnabout face and said that things that have always been unacceptable is now acceptable in our world. And the inevitable outcome of using drugs is it will kill more and more people. And it means that long term the police will have less and less power to enforce stopping its use, because if society says it's okay and they accept it, then that takes away the authority for anybody to stop it, especially the drug enforcement. They have always had the responsibility to eliminate the use of drugs, of any kind of drug. And now society says we want the drugs. We want to waste ourselves mentally and physically. And the question of this video is to ask people who have been probably asking themselves, is there any point for having the DEA or any kind of enforcement of stopping drug use if society accepts that it's the only option they have? Using drugs helps them escape reality, and the more they do that, the less they'll have. They think they'll have no problems anymore. But escaping reality only creates the reality that you don't want to live in this society. And then boom, 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 you got probably more and more overdoses, more suicides, more death. And the more that the police are targeted by these random shootings, the more it sounds like it could be indirectly tied to the fact that these young kids are addicted to drugs. And how did that happen? Because now society says that we have to be able to use marijuana to help our children. And a lot of people get prescriptions from doctors, and they buy the prescriptions for these recreational use marijuanas. And before, when it was still illegal, there was some control by the police, and there was some control from parents about keeping it out of the hands of those who would otherwise just kill themselves. And again, I say this to parents: if your child needs it, as far as cannabis oil, do you think it's going to end there? Do you think the child is going to get better because now you have on something that's maybe giving them short-term relief from whatever illness they're suffering from, maybe the pain they feel with their breathing? No, it's not going to help. It is only a short-term solution. And long-term, the longer that child inhales that cannabis oil, the more addicted they get to it. And eventually, that's probably what will happen to them. They'll become a drug addict. And if they can't get it after that, and the doctor tells them, no, you can't use this because it's not helping you, then what's the inevitable outcome? They're going to go to something even harder, even worse. Methamphetamine, crack. I mean, really, 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 really bad stuff. Cocaine, all of that. And marijuana is only the first step. That was the first type real drug there was out on the market when America was faced with, junkies and dope addicts. And now our whole society accepts it and says, well, there's nothing we can do about it, and there's no reason to do anything about it. In Georgia, you've got some legislators who are trying, even right now, to make it a legal fact that you be allowed to grow marijuana. This way, the parents who probably have to get it out of state, the cannabis oil, if they could grow it in their own yards, then they can make the medicine. Or they could, buy it from retailers who sell the stuff after processing it themselves, and then you don't have to go out of state. Some states already do it. I know California and Colorado. There are other states I know that are already doing these things. And all it means in the long term is this: America is going to be a dope addict society. Those who don't want to pay will probably be able to get it free of charge from a street junkie, or they can just get a prescription at their doctor's office and say, I need this stuff, and then long term you'll just basically waste yourself smoking it. And the addiction starts from the simplest little thing like a medically necessary inhalant, and then it becomes, beyond that step, a junkie or a drug addict who continually gets worse as they get older, because then your body can't go without it. And people are lying to themselves if they think that your child who has a need for this medicine is going to be able to get off of it if they're using it long term. There is no way you can get a kid off of something like a barbiturate or a narcotic if they've already started using it. And the younger they start on it, the less chance you'll ever get them off. They've had rehab services to get people off drugs for 60 years, 50 years. And, you hear about it, and people now just don't even want to even remember those things anymore because they figured, they didn't know how to control the usage. Well, it doesn't matter how you see it. A narcotic is still a narcotic, how small it is, how little there is of it. And once it contaminates your body will say, I have to have that more and more and more. So the DEA, as a drug enforcement agency, is probably going to become extinct very, very soon, because people are more and more saying we need to have all the options open to us, whether it be a legal or an illegal drug, and we'll get it any way we have to. And if you think that it's going to help you, it's not, because addiction is still an addiction. And no matter how many times you try to prove to yourself that your child is getting better because of it, you're the liar. And your kid is probably going to be eventually dead from overdose, or they will sit there with black baggy eyes saying, why did you let me take this stuff in the first place? It isn't helping me. It never has helped me. And you would think, well, my kid deserves the best. Well, not everything is best if it's not going to help them long term. That's what our society has gotten to the stage. They don't care what happens long term about anything. That's why Obama became president. They did not see what he was doing in 2008. They didn't see what he was doing in 2012. They thought, well, it doesn't matter. It's still my little world. And that's where drug addiction is going. This is their little niche. This is their little lifestyle. This is their own world. And marijuana takes them into it. And they're like, I don't want to hear what you have to say, because you know what? If I'm dead tomorrow, I've puffed my way into it, and I at least was happy. That's what anybody who's taken drugs will tell you. It gives you a high because it makes you feel better about yourself, but really you're only escaping reality. And drug addiction is not good for anybody, because the worse off it gets, the less chance you're going to ever have to come out of it. And the parents who are having these delusions that marijuana is going to help their children, it is a sad, sad reality that you're putting your child into an early grave, because what they inhale now, they're going to want it for the rest of their lives.